Climate change is the defining challenge of our time. Droughts, fires, floods, rising temperatures and other global warming related disasters are increasing in frequency and severity. Not just an existential threat, but climate change is causing other problems like shortage of food grains, and in the latest, it is contributing to inflation. A report by the European Central Bank has flagged that climate change is accelerating inflation in dozens of countries around the world. The researchers studied the impacts of global warming on inflation in 121 countries. They found higher than average temperatures are driving up the cost of food and other goods and services. The uptick in prices then ripples across the global economy. As per the report, climate change will increase global inflation by as much as 1 percentage point every year as food costs climb. Analysts predicted rising temperatures mean annual inflation will be between 0.32 to 1.18 percentage points higher by 2035. The largest impacts likely will be felt in the global south, especially in Africa and South America. The researchers added higher temperatures will also modify the seasonality of inflation. Now, for more on this, we have with us Dr. Benjamin Paul, who is the head of Climate Diplomacy and Security Program at ERLFI, which is a Berlin-based think tank. Thanks very much, sir, for speaking to us.
Thanks for inviting me.
Sir, if we don't redress the climate emergency, it will become a staggering cost. And it will adversely affect not just our grocery bills, but many other aspects of our ordinary lives, isn't it? How do you assess the global anti-climate change fight, given multiple differences, even within the European Union, for example, on the future of, say, nuclear energy?
Yes, thanks. I think, first of all, it is really important to underline the key message of the paper, that climate change, that the climate crisis will impose a huge cost as, various impacts cascade down from the direct biophysical climate impacts towards, their knock-on impacts on economies, societies, social systems, and so on. And I think this is very important to underline, because so much of our discussion is about how much it will cost to transform our economies towards sustainability, with the implication that we cannot make do without coal. We still need combustion engines, and so on and so on. And in reality, we have to realize that just continuing doing what we have been doing the way we have been doing it, this creates huge costs, and that's what this paper underlines. And of course, it's worth also emphasizing that this is only one impact chain by which climate change, will drive inflationary pressure. There's many more impacts that will have, similar effects. For example, wet bulb temperatures going up and making physical labor harder and more dangerous. So I think the first point to underline is that we really urgently need to work on the climate crisis, both in terms of adapting to its impacts, but above all in reducing its scale, its risks by cutting emissions. So then where do we stand on this one? We clearly have made progress and are making progress, but that progress is too little, and it needs to be accelerated, and it needs to be accelerated now. And there are, of course, as you alluded to, there are many cleavages and differences between countries, between various groups. But the debate should, in my opinion, focus less on these differences and, frankly, on the blame games that they often lead to, and should focus much more on, which measures can demonstrate how we are making progress. like we have been making progress on making renewable energy more competitive. So maybe rather than focusing so much debate on what divides us and who to blame, we need to press forward. And if different countries choose different pathways, I think that's acceptable. You know, we can then see
Yes.
how different measures help or help more or less. Yeah?
Yes. You talked about differences and cleavages. Now, it is clear now that climate change is a secret driver of price rise. How are the governments across the world, in your opinion, looking at this? You know, this is bound to make it harder for central banks to keep inflation within the target range.
Yes, I mean, it is driving inflationary pressures. And as I said, there are more climate impacts that would, in addition, drive inflationary pressures. But there's, of course, many other influences. And I think the important point here is that it drives, also in the paper, that it drives inflation as long as there is no adaptation, as long as everything else remains equal. So the consequence is everything else must not remain equal. So we need, in this respect, adaptation at scale, both in terms of adapting production, let's say by better and more drought-resistant crops, but also in terms of, you know, creating, sustaining alternative livelihoods, and in terms of, you know, creating a global food system that ensures better than we've done so far, that, you know, if there's a drought somewhere, or maybe even simultaneous droughts somewhere, that doesn't translate into huge impacts somewhere else, because the governance structures that we have actually elevate the risk, which is what's happening very often now. If you currently have a drought in a certain country, then the first response very often by the government is, if it's a food exporting country, is to, you know, cut on the exports, so to keep prices domestically under control. But of course, that means even bigger price rises for importing countries. So this is something where, you know, we really need a shift in the governance system to be more resilient.
All right, Dr. Benjamin Paul, we'll leave it there. Thanks very much for joining us with your perspective.
Thanks again.